Dobry dzień, everybody. I'm Boris Johnson from London. Slava Ukraini.
Johnson has been a very vocal supporter of Ukraine, and even if some of this may have been quite a cynical attempt to distract from his ongoing domestic issues, there's no reason to believe the UK's position towards Ukraine will change.
His political demise is seen in a way as a loss of key political ally for Ukraine.
Стратегічно курс на підтримку України і посилення цієї підтримки поділяють цю думку 85% виборців британських, не лише консерваторів.
Hello and welcome to Ukraine in Flames, special project by Ukraine Media Center and Euro-Atlantic Course NGO. My name is Lesa Bidochko and today we'll talk about Boris Johnson's resignation, post-Boris Britain, and Ukraine's context. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson's resignation might be perceived with a kind of relief across Westminster, while in Kyiv it was taken with despair. Boris Johnson, whose approval rating in UK sits below 25%, seems to be very popular within Ukrainians. According to the latest polls, 89% of Ukrainians have positive or rather positive attitude to this conservative politician. What's behind the success of Boris Johnson, or how Ukrainians informally call him Johnsonyuk, playing trick with the prime minister's surname by making it Ukrainian-like? First of all, it's about British support of Ukraine. For example, British NLAW missile system have played a crucial role in deterring Russian troops from Kyiv during the first days of full-fledged invasion. Secondly, the UK has launched a major training program. 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers will get necessary skills to fight on the front line. Thirdly, his departure provoked fears that UK's support for the country might also decline, as well as UK's military support. Johnson's personality has played a crucial role in the way Ukrainian people see him. Johnson has been one of the most vocal supporters of Ukraine. Just remember his personal visit to Kyiv and strolling along the streets, talking to the locals and recording videos from the train. I'm sure you all agree that these things are very positive and they send positive vibes. Also, the outgoing British Prime Minister is so popular in Ukraine that several towns have already proposed naming streets after him. Moreover, Johnson's robust support for Ukraine was one of his few popular policies during his scandalous final months of his premiership. His stance actually mirrors widespread public position for Ukraine in the UK, where opposing to Putin's invasion is seen as reflections of British values and British interests. Some Johnson's critics frequently accuse the under-fire MP of using the war in Ukraine to distract from his own domestic policy. Johnson himself reassured that his departure would not lead to weakening of Ukrainian security cooperation with Britain. But some experts still underline that for Ukraine is very crucial to win until October, the months Johnson would step away as a prime minister and the months before midterms elections in the US. Will Johnson's resignation make a dramatic difference to the UK's policy toward Ukraine? British TV anchor and host Chris York shared his own vision on the situation.
But Boris Johnson has resigned, and it's understandable that Ukrainians are worried this might affect the UK's support for their country in the war against Russia. Johnson has been a very vocal supporter of Ukraine, and even if some of this may have been quite a cynical attempt to distract from his ongoing domestic issues, there's no reason to believe the UK's position towards Ukraine will change. Firstly, there's the fact that rather than a president like in Ukraine, the UK instead has a prime minister. At election time, the British public votes for a party and its policies rather than a single person, meaning policies tend to stay pretty consistent regardless of who the prime minister is. While Johnson has obviously been the face of the UK's support for Ukraine, it's much more accurate to view it as the UK's support as a country rather than the decisions of just one man. There's now a leadership race underway to see who will be the next Prime Minister, and you will see that all of the candidates differ slightly in their priorities and what they say they want to achieve, but there's absolutely nothing to suggest that any of them want to change the Conservative Party's stance on Ukraine. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Ukraine wasn't mentioned much by the candidates at all, simply because it's an absolute given that support for Ukraine will continue. It's also worth noting that support for Ukraine is cross-party, so even if there was a general election tomorrow and the Labour Party won, nothing would change.
Chris York highlighted the role of UK Defence Minister Ben Wallace in supporting Ukraine. It's worth recalling that Ben Wallace ruled himself out of the election race and assured that UK support to Ukraine will continue despite Tory leadership crisis. He said that assistance to Ukraine, quote, "we give is not just one person, not me, not the Prime Minister, it's the whole effort. Actions matter in all of this. While Prime Minister will be incredibly sad to leave his post, he has led from the front of Ukraine. The whole of the political system is supporting of what we're doing in Ukraine, and I don't expect that to finish." End quote.
Another positive aspect of all this is that the UK's Defence Minister, Ben Wallace, has already ruled himself out of the leadership contest. As the Defence Minister, it's been Ben Wallace who has made the actual decisions about what military support the UK gives Ukraine, even if Boris Johnson has tried to take credit for most of it. When he announced he wouldn't enter the leadership race, Ben Wallace specifically said the decision was made so that he could concentrate on his current job, which obviously a major part of which is support and help for Ukraine.
Chris York also mentioned the possibility if anyone among the leading candidates can be regarded as less frank or less warm-hearted concerning Ukraine and President Zelensky.
There is another point I think it's important to make. I think that there's a good chance that whoever is the next leader, it might not look as if they're as supportive as Boris Johnson was. This is because, as mentioned earlier, Johnson unfortunately did use Ukraine quite a bit to try to deflect attention away from his own domestic troubles. Whenever there was another scandal at home, he would either call Zelensky or, when he needed a really big distraction, fly to Kyiv to meet him. Of course, the new Prime Minister will undoubtedly still call and visit Ukraine and Zelensky, but don't be concerned if it happens less regularly. This is less a sign that the UK support is decreasing, more a sign that the new Prime Minister doesn't need to use the relationship to distract from their own issues.
Viktor Kostantinov, Associate Professor at Institute of International Relations, Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv, states that for Ukraine, Johnson's resignation is a risky and an unpleasant event. But London won't stop supporting Ukraine. No, rather, there is no certainty that Ukraine will remain in the center of London's political agenda.
In Ukraine, Boris Johnson's resignation was met with much discontent. That's because many Ukrainians, Ukrainian politicians, President Zelensky himself, still see Johnson as a friend, a sincere friend, and staunch supporter of our country. From the very start of the conflict, Johnson was one of few world leaders to express his absolute backing of Ukrainian position, his trust in Ukrainian ability to resist, and his trust in Zelensky leadership. And that is much appreciated in our country. And that is why his political demise is seen in a way as a loss of key political ally for Ukraine, the loss in the middle of the war. And it's not just an emotional assessment of situation. This attitude has very rational part behind. Mostly because the very choice of British extremely proactive policy in the war, starting from February, was much due to Johnson himself. It was his special attitude towards foreign policy. His idea of restoration of British greatness after Brexit was completed. And as soon as he was looking for allies, he was looking for areas in the world where Britain can play a crucial role, the choice in favor of Eastern Europe and Ukraine in particular, brought him and his foreign policy into the region and turned British government and to a certain extent Britain into one of the most visible and most important actors in East European politics. So this story started well before the war. And that is why it was absolutely natural that since the start of the war, he was one of few who still believed in Ukraine and in Ukrainian cause and did a lot to support Ukraine. Plus, we need to add his personal crusade against Putin, also a long story, especially in last years, which also made him maybe a key figure in international opposition to any kind of compromises with Russia. And in turn, with all influence he had, and I suppose still has, on Zelensky, he was able to persuade our president not to go into any kind of secret talks with Russia and not to agree to any kind of compromise with some territorial losses, which was the case in the initial part of this conflict. But as soon as this is his own policy and no other potential contender in the prime minister company, which already started in Britain, no other contender is so obsessed with foreign policy and British greatness. It's hard to imagine that we will end up with another prime minister as supportive of proactive British policy in this particular situation. So now, even though we do understand it's an extremely complicated and blurred picture with potential contenders and with incoming polls inside Conservative Party, basically doesn't matter who will climb to the apex of party leadership and who will ultimately become a prime minister of Britain after Johnson. Anyway, the major issue we are facing is whether Britain will be able to remain a driver of Western pro-Ukrainian coalition, will keep pushing others into more active support of Ukraine, more active anti-Russian sanctions, or will Britain fall to the general ranks and will stay behind, just adding its own efforts to the common cause, but not being in the heart of those efforts. And I'm afraid that almost for sure we will see the latter. We will see the situation when Britain will be unable, not unwilling, but unable, having in mind all those critical issues of internal politics, which whoever will become prime minister will face first of all. Britain will be just unable to continue with as active policy in Ukrainian cause in our war with Russia, in Russian invasion, as it was the case during Johnson's rule.
I'd like to express special gratitude to Европейska Pravda outlet, which shared with us video with expert Alexander Krai, foreign policy expert at Ukrainian Prism. Alexander Krai voiced his own vision on the geopolitical consequences of Johnson's resignation and whether it would have drastic influence in Ukraine.
Фактично це майже нічого не змінює. Ну, ми знаємо, що в Джонсона була власна пасія до України, в нього було на цьому його імідж побудований.
Ну, так а як же, чому це не змінює тоді?
Бо стратегічно політика і партії, політика Британії щодо України не змінюється. Тобто, що може змінитися? Іміджовості стане менше паблісіті, стане менше візитів, можливо, менше заяв. Але стратегічно курс на підтримку України і посилення цієї підтримки поділяють цю думку 85% виборців британських, не лише консерваторів. Я не можу собі зараз уявити політика, який відмовиться від підтримки 85% виборців. Це дурість просто. Джонсон дав на неї певний тренд. І це те, що було в Джонсона популярно. І фактично, ми знаємо така тяглість в партіях, коли тобі треба перевершити попереднього лідера по тим параметрам, які в нього були найкращі, ти маєш показати ще більший клас. Тому політична логіка вказує на те, що наступному лідеру, як мінімум на початках, треба підтримувати оцей класний такий активний наратив. Можливо, якщо це буде там умовний Волес або умовний Сунак, це буде спокійніше, вони все-таки такі більш рівноважені. Але загальний тренд на підтримку, загальний тренд на таку агресивність, називаємо це так, я думаю, він збережеться, як мінімум, перший час, коли нам це буде найнеобхідніше.
You've been watching a special project by Ukraine Crisis Media Center and Euro-Atlantic Course NGO dedicated to Russian-Ukrainian war, Ukraine in Flames. How personally can you help Ukraine against Russian aggression? Please find this information in the description. If you like our job, if you find it useful, please like and share this video. Everything will be Ukraine.